to stabilize and strengthen the economic development portfolio. The Gauteng Department of Economic Development is responsible for planning and overseeing the growth of Gauteng's 2.4 trillion rand economy, which remains the economic engine of South Africa. Following the successful hosting of the Gauteng Investment Conference, where over 205 billion rand in investment pledges were secured, our focus has now shifted from pledges to implementation. Last week, I received reports from the 12 industry action labs tasked with operationalizing the GCR Economic Growth and Development Plan and overseeing implementation of the pledged investments. The action labs are to be the primary coordination forum for the private and public sector to jointly drive Gauteng's growth agenda. It remains my view that our focus on driving investment must not just be about making announcements. It must translate into visible infrastructure projects, industrial expansion, business opportunities for SMMEs, and most importantly, sustainable jobs for the people of Gauteng. Our priorities for this administration are therefore clear and non-negotiable. As per the GCR Economic Growth and Development Plan 2030, we are targeting 3% GDP growth by 2030. We are also facilitating the creation of north of 300,000 sustainable jobs. We are building an investment-friendly Gauteng, driving regional integration. And we are strengthening leadership and enforcing good governance across every institution entrusted with public resources. And lastly, we are responsible for generating revenue for the province so that we can continue to deliver on our service delivery mandate. Over the past 6 weeks, I have had the opportunity to engage with the leadership of the department and every entity under my authority, which, for the record, includes the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller, the Gauteng Growth and Development Agency and its subsidiaries, Constitution Hill, the Innovation Hub, and AIDC, as well as the Tshwane Special Economic Zone, the Gauteng Gambling Board, the Gauteng Liquor Board, and the Gauteng Tourism Authority. As of the 1st of May, we welcomed Dr. Fezile Ngobe and Ms. Thembiso Dlamini as the CEOs of Gauteng Enterprise Propeller and GGDA, respectively. Ms. Griselda Lewis was also appointed as the acting CEO of the Gauteng Tourism Authority. At the same time, we have prioritized rebuilding governance and institutional leadership in our institutions. So the process to appoint new boards for key entities is underway. And those entities include the Gauteng Gambling Board, the Liquor Board, the Gauteng Tourism Authority, and the Gauteng Enterprise Propeller. We are proud to announce that we have received applications from more than 2,000 South Africans who have applied to serve in the 48 available board posts. This is close to 3 times more than in the previous term. And this level of interest sends a powerful message that there are still many ethical, capable South Africans willing to rebuild public institutions and restore public trust. And we will, over the next few weeks, be working on the shortlisting and interviews for all the boards whose terms have or are due to expire. Stabilizing and restoring integrity within our entities is central to the work of this administration. I have approached this mandate with urgency and a clear understanding of what the people of Gauteng expect from their leaders. They expect a government that works. They expect institutions that serve the public interest. And they expect leaders who act decisively when public trust is undermined. Last week, I took an important step in this regard and released the Committee of Inquiry report into the Gauteng Liquor Board, which, as it has been reported, exposed serious irregularities and failures in governance in that institution. I have also shared this report with the Gauteng Provincial Legislature and the Economic Development Portfolio Committee, and have made it accessible to the public too via the department's online platforms. Our efforts to strengthen our working relationship with the liquor sector remain central to our goals at the Gauteng Liquor Board. We established a liquor stakeholders forum, and we hosted an inaugural meeting to formulate a joint approach to harm reduction and alcohol abuse. In my 6 weeks in office, we have also finalized and submitted the Gauteng Liquor Amendment Regulations to the legislature, which has approved the amendments. This will see, amongst other things, a 7% increase in the annual liquor license fees, a necessary intervention for improving revenue generation for the province after a prolonged period of 7 years without increase. We are now moving towards strengthening our oversight mechanisms, introducing technology-driven systems to minimize leakage and enable faster and more efficient application processes, as well as improve compliance. We are also ensuring that the province works collaboratively with the industry to generate lawful revenue while simultaneously addressing the social harm caused by alcohol abuse. Today, we continue on that path. The Gauteng Gambling Board is another key entity that is responsible for overseeing and controlling gambling activities in Gauteng, including the licensing of individuals and entities engaged in gambling activities. It is one of the institutions that is also responsible for generating revenue for public services via the collection of gambling taxes. And most importantly, it is responsible for ensuring the integrity of gambling activities in our province. With the surge in online gambling and the proliferation of gambling, especially amongst young people and professionals, it is more important than ever that this entity is fully capacitated to fulfill its mandate. It is deeply concerning, therefore, that since assuming office 6 weeks ago, I have been inundated with whistleblower reports, many of whom have requested to remain anonymous, citing various instances of misconduct, malfeasance, and maladministration at the Gambling Board. Further to this, I have also been furnished with the final forensic investigation report into the affairs of the Gauteng Gambling Board, prepared by an independent legal team led by Advocate Mukare. I have the report with me here today. The report, which was commissioned by my predecessor, MEC Lebogang Maile, in 2025, was concluded in January 2026 and presented to me shortly after I assumed my duties last month. The findings contained in this report are deeply concerning and corroborate many of the whistleblower reports. This report reveals procurement irregularities, financial misconduct, breaches of the Public Finance Management Act, failures in oversight, and the abuse of public resources within an institution that is entrusted with significant responsibilities in our province. It also goes further to make clear recommendations with regards to remedial actions and consequent management measures to be pursued. Given the gross nature of the findings and after careful consideration of the recommendations contained in this report, it has become clear to me that the status quo at the Gambling Board cannot continue. This report further directly implicates the CEO, Dr. Karabo Mbele, in serious governance failures and gross misconduct, including interference in funding adjudication processes, approval of funding before governance procedures were concluded, authorization of payments without supporting documentation, failures in compliance and oversight obligations, and various other leadership failures. The findings also point to broader institutional decay that, if left unchecked, would continue to erode public trust and compromise the integrity of this institution. Dr. Mbele, as part of the process of investigations, was furnished with the interim report and afforded an opportunity to make representations, wherein she failed to adequately address the allegations and provide sufficient evidence to the contrary. I have therefore acted on the recommendations of the report and terminated the employment of the CEO, Dr. Karabo Mbele, with immediate effect. The report also makes serious findings against the Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Oscar Maripane, including failures in financial governance, procurement irregularities, non-compliance with the PFMA, and breakdowns in internal controls and statutory reporting obligations. In light of these findings, Mr. Maripane has been suspended with immediate effect, pending the finalization of an internal disciplinary process. This is not a decision that has been taken lightly or for political expediency, but rather it is a necessary step towards stabilizing this very important institution and restoring confidence in its leadership. It's important to also note that the Gauteng Gambling Board does not currently have a constituted board, following the resignation of several board members in December 2025. I will therefore, in the coming days, be starting the process of appointing an administrator while the process of constituting a new board is underway. Leadership positions in government cannot become shelters from accountability. If we are serious about building a capable and ethical state, there must be consequences, visible consequences for misconduct, failures in governance, and abuse of public resources. Before I conclude, I want to thank and acknowledge the many whistleblowers who had the courage to come forward over the last few years. Without their bravery and their refusal to remain silent, many of these acts of malfeasance, poor leadership, and abuse of public resources may never have been exposed. Gauteng and South Africa at large needs more ethical and courageous public servants who are prepared to defend the public interest, even in the face of intimidation and personal risk. As this administration, let it be known that the fight against corruption will no longer be fought by whistleblowers alone. We are joining the fight decisively and unapologetically. As long as we are entrusted with the responsibility to govern, we will use that authority to restore integrity, enforce accountability, and fundamentally change the public perception of government through action, through consequence management, and through ethical leadership. I further wish to thank Advocate Mukare, Senior Counsel, and his team for conducting a thorough and independent investigation, including the review of more than 80,000 pages of evidence and documentation over the last 12 months, conducting numerous interviews, both internal and external, with whistleblowers and staff members, and following up meticulously on every lead they were given. Lastly, I would like to thank my predecessor, MEC Maile, for initiating this report and laying the foundation for the accountability measures we are implementing today. We will use the authority entrusted to us not to protect and shield wrongdoers, but to restore good governance, to enforce accountability, and rebuild public confidence in government institutions. Corruption, maladministration, and abuse of leadership positions will not be tolerated under this administration. And no individual, regardless of their status or their station, will be above reproach. The people of Gauteng deserve competent, ethical leadership, functioning institutions, and a government that acts firmly and decisively when public trust is violated. We are now on that journey towards rebuilding our institutions, to restoring integrity, and clearly demonstrating that public institutions can be a force for change with the right leadership. And under this leadership, the Gauteng Department of Economic Development will rise. I thank you.
Thank you so much, MEC. Just to note one small correction on the media statement. The acting CEO for GTA is Griselda Venter.
Oh, Griselda Venter.
Sorry.
My apologies.
For our colleagues at the
My word. Can I put it on record? My sincere apologies to Griselda Lewis. I meant Griselda Venter. Please let the records show. Indeed, it just shows the power of the brand of Griselda Lewis.
Thank you for that, MEC. Colleagues, we'll move into a round of questions. If there are any from the floor, please indicate by raising your hands. May you please tell us your name and the media house that you are representing. I see one from Tembisa Online. 2 is News 24. Anybody else? Okay, we'll run with those 2 for now, MEC. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Mfanelo Zanile. I'm from Tembisa Online. MEC, I just wanted to find out, you spoke about the initiative that you're going to take in terms of the e-car and taking licensing and everything. Is there any way that you can help those who might have been owning ship-ins, maybe for 20 years, who are still struggling to get like permit or license to be formally trading? Because it looks like there's been a struggle back then, and then there was an announcement that the ship-ins are no longer, the shipping permits are no longer being issued. So I just wanted to find out, is there anything that the government can do for those operators? Thank you so much.
Siamtanda?
Morning, MEC. My name is Siamtanda Kapa from News 24. Last week we were at a briefing with the MEC for Finance, and he laid out some of the numbers and the state of the Gauteng finances. And one of the things that came up was unconditional grants that were not spent. Agriculture was one of those departments, and I think it's about 75 million or 74. I don't know, you can correct me on the figure, but an unconditional grant not being spent. Could you please give us the reasons why that happened? It was your portfolio, and after all,
It is.
And not spending a conditional grant and the risk of it possibly or potentially going back to the treasury. Do you not think that's criminal, or are you not worried about that at all? And then with regards to your current portfolio now, what's the true sense of what you found there, really, like in a nutshell? Can you just briefly describe, are you worried about what you found in the portfolio that you're in? I hear what you've given us about the state of the entity, but I just want to get a sense from you about and do you think it's something that you can quickly turn around? Thank you.
ABC, I think, Ayanda?
Thank you. Ayanda from Brits Africa Channel. MEC, normally after the investment conference and the pledges are moving towards implementation, there will always be some bottlenecks. We've seen this with the South African Investment Conference, but what investors normally want to know, what mechanisms are you going to be doing in troubleshooting those, or you're going to be waiting, similar to the South African Investment Conference, for the next year to really resolve those. So this time around, do you have a mechanism in place for all those stumbling blocks?
Okay, I think we can deal with those 3, MEC.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for those questions. Let me start with the last question, because that's really where I started my remarks. We have indeed shifted our focus to implementation. And in doing that, we have had to reflect on what become some of the biggest challenges and stumbling blocks towards implementing on those investment pledges. Now, it's important to set out that those investment pledges that make up the 205 billion rand are pledges that come from private entities, private companies. Some are domestic investors, some are international investors. Some already have operations in the province and would then be simply expanding their operations and making additional investments. So all of these different projects would be at different stages. However, when we note them as a pledge, we have already, at that point, we would have already done due diligence on those projects, and we would already have satisfied ourselves that they are at a relatively advanced stage, i.e., they are ready and implementable and funding ready and or already funded. So we don't simply kind of, it's not a matter of anybody comes and says, I'm pledging, and it's a pledge. Prior to the actual investment conference, significant work is done to actually do due diligence on these pledges to ascertain whether they are ready for implementation and what specific interventions they require from us as government to be able to move them along. Now, the challenges that sometimes arise would often arise, for example, in what is often blanketed as red tape issues. So to that effect, we have set up a mechanism to be able to fast track and assist with the unblocking of red tape kind of blockages. You know, for example, we have the one-stop shop, but in addition to that, we have now actually enhanced our implementation mechanisms through the establishment of action labs. Action labs are divided into the 12 key sectors that form the basis of our economic growth plan. And the members of these action labs are a combination of leaders from business as well as from the public sector who can then jointly oversee the implementation of some of these projects, but also oversee the execution of our broader economic growth plan. And so my point is that in establishing these action labs, number one, in the work that is done by the one-stop shop, and also in the due diligence that is done prior to the investment conference, we've really tried to build in additional safeguards, if you will, to ensure that we can have successful implementation of these projects. Let me leave it there. Let me come to the question you asked, Siamtanda, about what my sense is about the report. The report is very clear. The Gauteng Gambling Board, for many years, has been wrestling with this issue of governance failures, various forms of institutional failure and inefficiency, and leadership challenges, both in terms of the boards, as well as the CEO and the executives. And it doesn't start today. But, and what this then does, as we know, leadership has an impact on everything that then transpires in the organization. There are people who were exited from the organization. So in doing that, we've lost significant capacity and institutional knowledge. There is quite obvious corruption and malfeasance that has taken root in the culture of the organization, and also a culture of fear, where people are not empowered or enabled to voice their views and concerns for fear of being hounded out of their jobs. And so, long story short, we have an institution that has become beset by a very toxic culture and is besieged by significant governance challenges overall. But at the heart of this, and this is why we've taken the action we've taken, is poor leadership and leadership that has unfortunately failed to steer this organization in the direction that it should be going, and that has not responded often to the issues that have been raised even by the people in the institution. So that is a very high level. There are also some criminal matters that potentially also need to be explored in this report. And certainly our actions and the actions we've announced today are not conclusive. As I had said, the immediate focus is on stabilizing the leadership and the governance of the institution, but there must and will be a program of action towards implementing some of the remedial actions over the next few months. And between myself, the administrator, and the incoming board, this will form part of the longer journey of getting the gambling board back to where it needs to be, and back to being an institution that can deliver its mandate on behalf of the province. Although it's not today's topic, but I'll wear my other hat for a moment. I am still MEC for Agriculture and Rural Development, so I am very much still responsible for that. It's a conditional grant, and this is an important distinction. Conditional grants are granted from national government. So at the beginning of the year, when we present our budgets, in that number that you will see is what is pledged effectively by national government, should all the conditions be met. It is not money that we receive in our accounts or in the treasury account. It is money that is available that can be released subject to certain conditions being met. Those conditions range from a number of things in terms of project readiness, readiness for implementation, of course also a number of administrative issues around whether, you may find a project was initially funded, but then to be able to release subsequent funding, there has to be project reports that are then given. You will know, Siamtanda, we had an issue in GDAD a year ago with a project that I myself put a stop to because I was not of the view that it was a bona fide use of public funds because the project itself had not delivered on what it was meant to deliver on and for the purposes for which it was approved. And this continues to be the rigorous process of assessment that we make before I am able to append my signature to say we are happy now to request those funds. So this is a part of an ongoing process, and I think it's important to clarify, these are not funds that are being returned. These are funds that are released conditionally once certain conditions are met for certain projects. And I'm of the view that we need to be chasing quality and impact, not simply spending. I know that is a change of perspective, but it's an important one because we have built a culture where where entities or departments receive clean audits, they spend all their budgets, but on the ground, the impact of those activities are not felt or seen. And the public is asking themselves, where does all this money go? Where are these projects that all this money is being spent on? So we have implemented rigorous assessment processes, which for now have resulted in us registering some under expenditure. But we are of the view, especially now that we've appointed a new head of department and we are implementing some of our institutional reforms within GDAD, that we will soon be turning that around as well. Mfanelo, thank you for your question as well. And this is a really important matter that you've raised. We actually will be meeting with the Gauteng Liquor Traders Association this week as well. And one of the key topics around this engagement is to discuss the way forward and how we are going to work together to regularize shebeen owners, tavern owners, etc. We reported last week that in terms of the Gauteng Liquor Board, we currently have 33,000 outlets that are licensed from which we generate revenue. But we have close to 200,000 people who are operating illegally or without valid licenses. And that ranges from your shebeen type establishments right up until even some of your formal establishments, wherein they are sometimes in cahoots with enforcement and law enforcement to then not enforce those laws. So we are, and that's why I spoke to those far-reaching reforms. We want to expand the pie. We want to see shebeens, taverns, and all liquor outlets that should be receiving licenses getting regularized, because one, that is revenue for us, but two, it's also protection for the public. There are obviously a number of entities that are trading in areas or under circumstances that would be prohibited or would not be allowed by the Liquor Board, and that is something we also need to accept. because enforcement and compliance is an integral part of our mandate as well. So we are on a journey that we are walking with the industry, and our primary objective is to regularize the industry and ensure that all those people who want to sell liquor in our province or trade in liquor, they must do so legally. And all of those who are looking to be licensed, we ourselves must also be able to ensure that that process is efficient and that they're able to do so expeditiously. Thank you.
Thank you so much, MEC. Any other hands before we conclude? We'll do SABC, EWN, and then we'll close off with power. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zina Butilezi from SABC News. I just have two questions for MEC. The first one regarding the liquor board. So my first question is pertaining to the media statement that was released on the 10th of May, if I'm not mistaken. On that brief, the MEC briefly outlined that there's huge corruption in the liquor board, whereby people who are running shebeens and taverns are under the radar doing their establishments in places where their policy or the act is not allowing them to do so, near churches, near schools, and so forth. So I wanted to ask MEC, I heard you were talking a lot about the actions that will be implemented, actions. So I want you to briefly give us maybe a summary of those actions that will be taken to combat that crisis of corruption in the liquor board. And secondly, I saw that there's going to be an increase in the licensing liquor. So I want to ask, is that not going to maybe increase the corruption, as we already have an unstable economy and there's a rise in unemployment and the fuel prices are hiking, which makes everything high. So does the increase not also increase the corruption?
Yeah, I hear you.
Dimakato.
Hi, I'm Dimakato, Bishop from EWN. I just wanted to ask regarding the great mention of your target to grow the economy by 3% by 2030. Can you just take us through how exactly are you going to do that? I mean, Gauteng has a problem with generating income at the moment. There are huge financial constraints. So what are you going to be doing? You talk about 300 sustainable jobs. Just insight in terms of your plans of how are you going to achieve that? And in terms of the entities that are here, are they still fit for purpose? Are there any other issues with any of the other ones? Like, for example, you have the enterprise propeller. Because it's not showing up in the data in terms of the growth of small enterprises. Is it there? What's happening with it? An understanding of if these entities are actually fit for purpose, and if there are any changes that you see. I know it's too soon to be in the position, but you know what we can look out for.
Sure.
Good day, MEC. It's Kosnati Shazi from Power FM News. Just one question. So of course, gambling plays a big role in revenue collection for the Gauteng government. Contributes to the GDP, but it also seems to be a double-edged sword because you are citing your concern on the surge of online gambling and the pro-regulation of it, especially amongst young people. If I'm not mistaken, Rise Mzansi has also tabled something in Parliament where they call for the regulation of online gambling. Just your reflections on your concerns of the rise of online gambling, especially considering the fact that it actually plays a major role towards revenue collection. Thank you very much.
I think that was it. Is that it, colleagues?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for those wonderful, brilliant questions, colleagues. Let me begin perhaps with yourself. It's Zine Butsile.
Butelezi.
Eh?
Zine.
Oh, Zine Butelezi. Okay, that makes more sense. So you're correct in saying that we did outline the high-level initiatives and actions we plan to take towards resetting and actually, getting the liquor board back to where it needs to be. And I don't want to go through that fully again, but I'll share at a high level. One of the key issues that we face is indeed our level of revenue collection. So just for context, in terms of our annual revenue collected for the whole Gauteng province's liquor licensing, we collected 16 million rand from everybody who is selling and trading alcohol in our province. Now, I don't want to estimate how much alcohol would have been consumed just this weekend in this province with the various football games that were happening. You can imagine the quantums. So we are sitting in our province with a multi-billion rand industry for which, as the regulator, we currently are only collecting 16 million rand. And that is the full size of the purse that we then have available to us to actually do our work of regulating this industry, combating the various social harms, and reinvesting into social programs that then assist us with ensuring that the liquor industry is not harmful. Those ratios are completely off. And it's a function of the fact that we have not had any any increases in the liquor licensing regime in the last 7 years. So that's one. I think what's also important, pardon me? Okay. Yeah, no, it's fine. So I think what's also important to note is that we also have spoken quite extensively about the digitization process and how we need to make it easier for people to trade legally in the province. So, and that is also, and we must accept that there are actually many people who would want to have a liquor license, but they have found it difficult to do so because of the difficulty, the cumbersomeness of our own internal processes and our own application processes. There are people who have been waiting for applications to be approved for more than 2 years. Some will even tell you it's been more than 5 years. They have not received responses. So we are firmly of the view that we have to expedite the moving to a digital application process, which will facilitate that and also help us to increase the size of the pie. Lastly, it's really also about enforcement. And you spoke about, your question was spot on to say, if we are to increase prices, does that not create more room for backhanded transactions or backdoor transactions? And this really boils down to, one, our application process itself, but I think secondly, to our enforcement and compliance process. So, and this is something we spoke extensively about. We are reliant on law enforcement to assist our own enforcement capabilities. We have inspectors that go out that are able to then ascertain whether people have licenses or not. But once a compliance officer leaves the site and issues a non-compliance certificate, it is up to law enforcement to ensure that that place stays closed. And what we have seen is that enforcement is not happening. That coordination with law enforcement, even the coordination with municipalities, is a challenge. So we have to strengthen that to ensure that we are all speaking the same language, and that when we are putting out perhaps new regulations or where we are trying to enforce, that enforcement is actually being upheld by the law enforcement officials. Just as a last, so just as a last point, our intention is not to penalize law-abiding citizens. We know that there are many bona fide entrepreneurs in the liquor industry who are not only contributing to their own families and livelihoods, but to society. And they are trying to operate legally, and those are the people we want to make it easier for. But for the people who want to abuse the system, who don't want to comply, and who are hell-bent on breaking the law, it is our job to make it difficult for them to trade in the province. And that's what we intend to do. Dimakazo, I don't know how much time you have, but this topic is one that really excites me. And I know HOD is also very passionate about this topic as an economist himself. We recently released the GCR Economic Growth and Development Plan 2030, which I think we'll also share with yourself, because that plan is quite comprehensive about what it envisions as the growth trajectory of the province, but also where exactly that growth will come from, and how we need to shift the structure of the economy to be one that is more industrial in nature, so drive industrialization actively, focus on industries that are labor intensive, and also ensure that we are able to leverage all of our collective capabilities, whether it's through public procurement, whether it's through the regulatory capabilities of the municipalities, ensure that as the state, we are also an enabler for that growth rather than an inhibitor, which I think sometimes we are accused of being. So the first step for us was to identify the 12 key sectors that we are targeting for growth. And we've listed them, and I spoke about the action labs that we've now set up to implement on that plan. And within that, we are able to then say, looking at an industry level, so whether you are talking about the automotive sector, the creative sector, what are some of the others?
Tourism sector.
Tourism, for example. We have done the modeling to understand what then becomes possible in each of these sectors, and how then does that number roll up. You'll note, I think Gauteng is currently sitting on, 1.1%? Or circa 1.1, 1.2% growth. So that is currently where we are tracking, with no action taken. And we are of the view that if we can implement some of these strategic directives that we want to take through the different industries, we can then be able to actually fast track and catapult that growth. The other really important thing, and I spoke about this in the action labs, is that this is not for government alone to carry. This is not our cross to bear by ourselves. The economy is a dynamic melting pot of large industry, SMMEs, the informal sector, civil society, as well as ourselves as government. Domestic investors and international investors have a role to play. So when we take these investment pledges, or we speak about the investment pledge, you must see them in the context also of this broader growth plan that says these are now some of the projects that we are plugging into the plan that help us to actually track and see the growth, track and see the jobs, track and see the rands that are coming into the economy. And further to that, we are then able to have an industry level discussion at a sectoral level with different role players from these sectors to jointly own this plan. Because it's not our plan alone. It is the plan of the province, which means that all the different sectoral stakeholders must be part of making this plan a reality. And I believe, in conclusion, that our role primarily, first and foremost, is to play that coordination role, but also to be able to set that vision and those ambitious targets that the public can then respond to with their initiatives, their projects, and their activities. And then I think the other question you ask about the entity is very key. In short, I think the entities, and this is my assessment from the last 6 weeks, are not operating at the level at which they could. And primarily, it is also because of a lack of coordination between the entities themselves. Let me make an example. The Gauteng Growth and Development Agency is primarily tasked with investment facilitation. This is a really important function that they play. So when somebody comes to Gauteng and they want to invest, or they have an investment, technically speaking, the GGDA should be their first port of call. That then directs them and helps to unblock whatever those blockages may be. But you'll note that one of the biggest drivers, in fact, of investment and inward investment, inbound investment, is tourism. So people will visit South Africa, or they will see South Africa on international platforms, which then makes it an interesting destination to invest in. They will come here sometimes. Many people came, for example, for 2010. They saw South Africa for the first time and they said, actually, this is a place that we can be in and that we can work in, and they established themselves here. So we should be linking the work of tourism and understanding tourism, actually, in the context of investment attraction. Because it's not just about people coming to Gauteng on business. It's about saying, how do we keep that money here and make sure that those rands circulate within the Gauteng economy for longer? And further to that, the creative sector, as a core pillar of our economic growth plan, has a critical role in platforming South Africa to the world, and again, therefore putting us on the map. You know, I think if you look at the success of Hollywood and the film industry in the US, it's a form of cultural diplomacy where you are able to then share your story as a country on these platforms, and we need to do that better. So investing in the arts, investing in film, in music, in storytelling is not periphery to our economic growth agenda. It is core to our economic growth agenda. And it's how we get people to understand South Africa, to see South Africa, and to see us as a desirable investment destination. But then when they get here, we must then be able to do our part. So the work we are now doing with the institutions and the entities is indeed to get them functioning, capacitate them with the correct capable leadership, and also ensure that they are actually delivering on their mandate. So even from an SMME perspective, you know, the GEP is tasked with financing SMMEs. And you are correct in saying it has not succeeded to the extent that we would have liked it to. That work, we must fix that. So it's not about throwing the entity out. It's about diagnosing where are the issues in the entity and how do we once again link that entity to the broader economic growth agenda of the province so that it becomes an implementer agency and a financing agency beyond even its own balance sheet. It should be able to even go and raise funds from other entities and aggregate SMME funding through the GEP. But nobody is going to invest in an entity that is constantly in a cloud or a storm of governance challenges, where the leadership doesn't inspire confidence, and where we broadly have not proven that those funds will be used correctly. And so governance and good governance is a core part of how we get these institutions functioning and delivering their mandate so that they can be fit for purpose. Lastly, Nkosinathi, the issue of online gambling. So I think it's important to state for the record that I'm not anti-online gambling, and Rise Mzansi is not anti-online gambling. What we have been calling for is adequate, proper regulation around online gambling, which also must be able to regulate the extent and the nature of advertising of online gambling so that we can ensure that we protect the vulnerable people in society from the potential harms of gambling. This is a free society. Gambling is a legal activity. And those who wish to do so must be permitted to do so. But our job is to ensure that we minimize any potential harms by ensuring that the regulation is responsive and the regulation is able to actually address the real nature of the industry. And it has evolved significantly from where it started being only terrestrial land-based gambling. Now you can gamble in your bed at 2 a.m. in the morning. I imagine, actually, let me not say that, I don't know for a fact, but I'm assuming it's possible. And that changes the nature of the game entirely. So we have been driving for the Gambling Amendment Act and the regulations thereof. And I believe that that process is also moving along quite swiftly, and we should be able to have something passed in the legislature before the end of this year. That will enable us to unlock, the value and the revenue that is sitting now in this online gambling space. Why am I talking about revenue? It's not simply just for raising revenue. Part of our mandate as the gambling board is that we are supposed to raise that money so that we can reinvest it into programs, activities, and into the communities that are potentially facing social harm and the risks of gambling, and also just general social issues. Now, if we're not able to raise the money because our regulation doesn't even recognize online gambling, we cannot do that part adequately. And that's a big part of it. We cannot, for example, drive large awareness campaigns. I mean, everywhere you go right now, I don't think you can walk into a public space or a major event without seeing online gambling advertising. Now, we cannot respond to that effectively because we don't have those same budgets to be able to put up a billboard that says, beware of online gambling, which is what we should be doing, informing the public, empowering the public to make better decisions, and also limiting gambling advertising in places where it is likely to cause undue harm to minors or to people who would be described as vulnerable communities. And there's a lot of work happening in that regard, being driven by Makashulekana as Rise Mzansi's representative in Parliament. And now, of course, with myself here, that work continues and we are able to actually implement it and see it over the line. Thank you.
Thank you, MEC. There's just one that I received. Tembisa Online would like you to please give a more detailed explanation about the action labs and how accessible they would be to businesses. And then we'll close it off with Dimakato, who has a follow-up, and then that will be it. Thanks.
So I want to understand, has the GDP for Gauteng grown above 2% in the last 5 years? Because I'm trying to determine if this 3% target is realistic. Because we've had downward revisions of growth projections from National Treasury, from whatever. So is that realistic? And have we been able to achieve growth above at least or just around 2% average over the last 5 years? And how much are the municipalities, if at all, weighing on growth in the province? There's a lot of municipalities, in fact most of them are troubled. Do they have an impact at all in your ability to grow the economy? And do you have, I know there's separation of powers or governance or whatever, but do you have any influence to, I don't know, to help? Because I'm assuming it's part of the same project, even if it's different spheres of government, but what impact do those have?
Sure. Thank you. With those two final questions, I'll try and keep it brief. So, as a country, so Gauteng, as you know, accounts for a third, effectively, of South Africa's GDP. And so we take a view that we have a particularly increased responsibility to drive growth. In other words, when Gauteng sneezes, South Africa catches a cold. So we have to make sure, first and foremost, that the economy of Gauteng is growing, potentially even at a faster rate than what would be the national average, so that it can actually pull up the national average because of how much it contributes. So the last 5 years, you'll appreciate, has been largely marked by the post-COVID recovery period. And it has taken some time to get to a regular state, i.e. many companies closed down, many companies shed jobs. We have changed even ways of work in the last few years. There have been significant issues. And very important to note as well, we now have a new administration and new leadership in this government. So there is a new governance agenda that is also now being pursued. So my point is that why we have come up with this economic growth and development plan in the first place is from a point of acceptance that we have not performed at the level at which we should have, and that we have more to do. But that can only happen if we are intentional about setting ourselves those targets, publicizing those targets so we can be held accountable to them, and then making sure that we put measures in place to be able to implement against those targets. The change is not going to just come about. We have to plan for it, and we have to direct it and implement it. And I think it's important to make the point that this is not work that is simply driven by the size of our departmental budget, right? Because people often conflate your size of your budget with your impact. Gauteng's economy is a 2.4 trillion rand economy. That is what we are responsible for as this department. And that includes engaging other role players from the private sector, from municipalities, international investors, domestic investors, even stealing investors from other provinces if we must, to attract them to Gauteng so that we can meet our targets so that the South African economy can grow. That is our approach to this. So we put that target in there because we felt it was realistic. And we felt that with certain key actions, we can indeed achieve that target in the medium term, which is by 2030. And municipalities, as you have asked, play a critical role in that. Because one of the biggest issues that is faced by people who want to establish in our province is ineffective municipalities. We have to get municipalities operating at the level at which they do, and I'm talking about basics, just getting the basics right. Ensuring that the lights are on, water's coming out of the tap, the area is secured, it's clean and well maintained. This is what attracts investment. And so we have to, so we are doing that work. We have IGR forums where we work with municipalities. The Premier also has a Premier's coordinating forum wherein we meet with mayors of the different municipalities, because as a province, we don't exist without municipalities. And this 3% that we want to achieve is going to come out of municipalities ultimately, because that is where people are doing their work. So we have to work closely with them. And then more detail on the action labs. I think what we can also do is make some of the written information available on our website, and I'll take that upon myself to do that and work with the team to do that. But suffice to say, there are 12 action labs, and each of these action labs is aligned with the different target industries that we are pursuing as part of the economic growth and development plan. We have constituted the inaugural structures, for lack of a better word, but there is some work also that is currently underway to evaluate the composition of each of these action labs and ensure that we have relevant role players from the different industries represented in each of the action labs. So the door is certainly still open, and I would encourage organizations, business representatives and otherwise who do have an interest in contributing to this work to participate. It's important to note, participation in action labs is on a voluntary basis. So these are not boards. They are our contribution and your contribution as the citizens of this country to help get this economy working. And so we do invite all people who are invested in these certain industries to then assist us with that work. Thanks.
Thank you so much, MEC, HOD and DDG. Colleagues, that brings us to the end of our media briefing. But before you leave, we do have refreshments available on the west wing of the building. So please do help yourselves to something to eat.
Please don't waste food. I am against food waste.
So please
You must
make sure
eat.
to make it